Hi, so in this video we're going to go through the process of installing and using the Massimo plugin for Maya, which helps you visualize the center of mass on characters and creatures. So the first thing you'll need to do is hop over to GitHub and download Massimo. That will give you a massimo.zip file. Simply right click that and do extract all. It doesn't matter at this stage where you extract it to, so I've just left it to extract into my downloads folder. Minimize that. Now if I launch Maya, and with Maya open, it's simply a case of selecting the drag and drop install.py and dragging it onto the viewport. That will pop up a security warning, so it's trying to load the Massimo runtime.py plugin. That's a custom node. Obviously, if you're not sure, you can absolutely go in and have a look at the code. It's all there and it's all open source, so you can validate that there's nothing malicious going on there. I'm just going to hit allow at this point, and same again. And it's told me now that the installation is complete and that we can launch Massimo from the animation visualize. So animation here and visualize. Massimo will be in this menu. At the same time, it's opened the tool for us as well. So before we do anything, we need a rig in our scene to actually visualize something with. So again, I've downloaded a rig called the Waitress rig. So I'm just going to reference that in. It doesn't matter whether you reference it or have it local. It makes no difference at this point. Come in. Okay, so I'm not overly familiar with the rig, so I apologise in advance if I get a little bit lost in here. So the first thing we do with this tool is click the plus button, because there's no mass nodes in the scene, so this will create a mass node for us. I'm just going to call this character mass. It doesn't matter what, basically this will define the name of the node. So character mass. You can see we've got the character mass node in our outliner now, and you can see we've got this big yellow sphere down here as well. Depending on the scale of your characters, this might be fine. This is obviously a bit big. So I'm going to click the settings button on the Massimo tool, and this is where you can see a bunch of settings. So whether we want to draw the sphere, there is a vertical line as it reaches, as it goes above the ground. But we can also change the size. So I'm going to maybe put that to 2. That looks a bit better. Maybe I'll just go 3 for now whilst we're recording, so it'll be a bit easier to see. Okay, so we've configured that a little bit more to our needs. The next thing that we need to do is tell it where the mass groups are. So for that, we just need to grab transforms and start adding groups. You could do that on the controls. There's nothing to stop you. However, you obviously you've got kind of FK controls, IK controls, and ultimately your center of mass is more about the end result of the rig rather than the control rig. So ideally, you want to do it on things like the joints, the skeleton, that kind of thing. So this does have a joints layer, so I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to turn off, let's have a look, we'll turn the joints on, and locators, because then we can see our mass node as well. So I'm going to start by grabbing maybe the hip and the higher part of the spine, and I'm going to add our first mass group. So this could be belly, it could be hip, it could be anything. I'm just going to call it hip for now. And you can see that because we've now got one mass group, it's immediately gone to the center of that mass group. Because I've named it hip, there's a bunch of predefined names where it'll automatically generate values for you. So for instance, if you put chest, it'll give you a chest value. If you put upper arm, it'll give you an upper arm value. These values are based off a research paper from the US Navy. If you use a name that is not recognized, that's absolutely fine. It will just give you a value of 1, and you can just fill those values in as you want. Okay, so let's carry on and just blast through this. So I want the chest now, so I'm going to grab that same joint here. Ideally at the point of the upper arms. Maybe I'll even grab the lower part of the neck. So I'm forming this area here as to being the chest. So I'll add a chest group. There we go. And you can see now it's pushed the center of mass up because it's now going between the center of the chest and the center of the hip. And it's then being biased by the mass values. So let's keep going, and I'm going to do the arms. So upper arm left and lower arm left. Now interestingly, there's no hands hand joints. I'm not sure how this rig in particular deforms the fingers, so I'm going to skip the hands on this. But obviously if you have joints around here, you can just grab various different points of like the finger bases or whatever to define hands. So I think it's this one, upper arm right, and lower arm right, and then we'll come over here to legs, so upper leg, oh my goodness, left, and lower leg left. Okay, I'll grab these two maybe for the foot there. Again, how detailed you want to get is kind of up to you. Generally, you don't have to be too detailed. Upper leg right, lower leg right, foot right. Okay, and then I guess we want the head, so I'll maybe grab this. I'm not too sure what these bones are, but I'll maybe grab that, so that gives me kind of roughly the center of the head. And because I've used fairly standard names for my stuff, you can see it's assigned values for me. I don't think I need to tweak any of them. Don't worry if you miss influences or you want to add joints into them, you can simply click the add and minus to add influences into these. Okay, so I'm going to hide the skeleton layer now, and I'm going to show everything in our character, and I'm going to hop to ghost mode for a second. So you can see this, we've now got the red sphere in the middle that represents the current center of mass of our character. We've got a line because that helps define the kind of gravity line running through it. Now if I pull out, if I grab some of these controls, and spin them over, you can see our center of mass is now moving. So immediately we can see that we've got a very off-balanced pose. The center of mass is over here and the line is coming over here, which is way in front of the feet or the contact points on the ground. So we know that this pose would be imbalanced, and therefore ideally we'd need to push a foot over here so that this line is somewhere in between the two contact points. It's also super useful. So for instance, obviously this is balanced, but as soon as you move your leg up, we've only got one contact point and that's not within it. So this is where it's handy because you can start to pull that in here, and as soon as that line is intersecting with your contact point, you know that you're starting to get a much more balanced pose that's more realistic and more achievable. And that's kind of the tool in of itself. So you can kind of just visualize and see how your controls, how your pose is balanced, and how well that works. Now obviously you don't want to go through this process every single time you load a scene. So the best thing to do at this stage is hit the save button, and I'm going to just drop this on my desktop, and I'm going to call this rig mass settings, perhaps .mass. So that's now saved to my desktop. So at this stage I can make a new scene, I can re-reference my character in, and rather than going through all of that process again, I can simply open up the mass mode tool, hit load, grab my settings file, and that will all regenerate. Obviously there's currently a bug where it's not remembering these settings, and I will get that fixed for you. But at this stage you're done. And you know, each animation scene that you want to work in, you can just simply load in that mass file, and you start to see the visualization of the mass of your character and your rig.